The California sun glimmered off the glass windows of the massive Tesla event center. The grand opening was meant to be a spectacle, clean energy, futuristic designs, and people from around the world dressed in sleek suits and designer gowns. Outside the building, a red carpet shimmered under the afternoon light. Cameras clicked, reporters scrambled. Executives smiled wide as they greeted guests, who arrived in polished cars that hummed silently to a stop, but a quiet woman in a simple blue sari stood near the entrance, clutching her handbag tightly and looking uncertain. She wasn't dressed like the others. She wore no badge, had no assistant or chauffeur. Yet her eyes sparkled with gentle pride, and in her heart something stronger than gold. She was there for her son. She had flown all the way from Chennai to surprise him. She hadn't told Sundar Pichai she was coming. She wanted to see the joy in his eyes when she appeared. Her name was Lakshmi Pichai. And today, she would not be welcomed as Lakshmi stepped forward toward the entrance. A sharply dressed woman holding a clipboard blocked her path. "Ma'am, you can't be here," the woman said curtly. Without a smile, Lakshmi's eyes softened. "I'm here to see Sundar," she said in a calm voice, her Indian accent delicate but clear. "He is my son." The woman raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Sure he is," she said, almost laughing. "Do you have a guest pass?" Lakshmi shook her head gently. "No, I came as a surprise." A security guard approached, alerted by the conversation. He looked at Lakshmi up and down her modest sandals, her aged but clean sari, the simple bag she held close. "Ma'am, this is a private event." "Please step aside," he said, firmer than before. Lakshmi opened her mouth, but paused. Something in their tone, in their eyes, told her she wasn't being mistaken. She was being judged, not by her identity, but by her appearance. "I can wait here," she offered. "When Sundar arrives, he will recognize me." The woman rolled her eyes and waved to another staff member. "Let's not cause a scene," she muttered. "Take her off the red carpet. We've got press arriving." Lakshmi was gently but firmly guided away from the entrance. She stood to the side, her pride stinging. Nearby guests whispered and stared. Some chuckled. No one stepped forward to help. Her son's name was on banners around the venue. His face was printed in the official booklet. Yet here she was, standing, outside, treated as if she didn't belong. Inside the building, Sundar Pichai was being ushered through crowds of executives and media. He smiled politely, shook hands, and nodded as people praised the collaboration between Google and Tesla. But something tugged at him, a small, inexplicable feeling. He glanced toward the entrance every now and then. His assistant, Jake, walked beside him. "Sir, Elon Musk will be here in 30 minutes. Shall I prep the talking points?" Sundar nodded slowly, but didn't respond. His mind was somewhere else. Outside. Lakshmi sat on a stone bench, her heart aching. She had always supported her son. From the days he studied under candlelight in Chennai to the moment he called her years ago and said, "I've been chosen to lead Google." She had watched him soar, but she had never let his success change her view. He was still her boy, the one who helped her carry vegetables home from the market and fix neighbors' radios. As she waited, a young man in a black vest walked by, holding coffee trays. He paused when he saw her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" He asked kindly. She smiled faintly. "I am waiting for my son." The young man looked toward the event entrance, then back at her. Something about her tone made him believe her. "Who's your son?" he asked gently. "Sundar," she replied, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His eyes widened. "Sundar Pichai?" She nodded. The young man's mouth opened slightly. "Wait here," he said quickly, setting the coffee tray down. He ran off toward a side entrance, heart pounding. Inside, Sundar was speaking to a group of tech journalists when the young man appeared beside Jake and whispered something in his ear. Jake looked surprised and stepped toward Sundar. "Sir, there's a woman outside. She says she's your mother." Sundar froze. His breath caught in his chest. He turned slowly to Jake. "What? An older woman? Wearing a blue sari?" "The valet just told me." Sundar didn't wait. He didn't ask another question. He walked fast, almost running, pushing past photographers and executives. Outside, Lakshmi looked up as the doors burst open. Her son stood there. Not as the CEO. Not as the speaker of the event. But as her child. Sundar said, his voice thick with emotion. She stood up, and in that moment, they both forgot the crowd. The cameras, the staff, the red carpet. Sundar wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. She didn't cry, but her hand trembled as she touched his back. You came, he whispered. I wanted to surprise you, she said. They didn't let you in. They didn't believe I was your mother. Sundar looked over her shoulder. At the staff near the entrance, the woman with the clipboard, the security guard, the other guests. He recognized the dismissive looks, the awkward glances. He pulled back and took her hand. Come with me, he said. Voice steady now. He walked her past the same security guard who had turned her away, past the woman who now stood frozen. The cameras turned. People watched as the billionaire tech giant held his mother's hand, no longer smiling for the media, but walking with purpose. Inside, a hush fell over the event space as Sundar entered with Lakshmi. A few whispered questions floated in the air. Who is she? Is that his... What's going on? Sundar walked straight to the stage where he was supposed to speak in 10 minutes. He took the microphone early, his mother beside him. People began to raise their phones. And then, in front of hundreds of guests and media, Sundar Pichai said something that no one saw coming. Before we begin today, I want to introduce the most important person in my life. He turned toward Lakshmi. This is my Amma. She came all the way from Chennai to be here, and she was denied entry. A ripple ran through the crowd. Sundar's voice stayed calm, but every word struck like thunder. She raised me with love, with strength, and with values. She taught me that true dignity is quiet, that kindness is power. She didn't need a suit or a badge to walk through these doors. Her presence should have been enough. People in the audience shifted uncomfortably. A few hung their heads. We talk about innovation and intelligence, Sundar continued. But without humility, all of it means nothing. His mother's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hide them. Today, Sundar said, I cancel all speaking points. Today, we listen to what silence tried to teach us. Never judge someone by what they wear. You never know if you're turning away a queen. The crowd fell into stunned silence. And then something remarkable happened. People stood. One by one. A standing ovation erupted. Not for the technology, not for the event, but for a mother in a blue sari who had been turned away and now stood. At the heart of everything. But just as the applause swelled, a man in the back of the room stepped out from the shadows. He wore a black suit, his eyes cold, and his badge clipped to his chest. He wasn't clapping. He was watching Sundar closely, and he wasn't there to celebrate. He was there to warn him. Asterisk as the applause faded into murmurs and stolen glances. Sundar felt the atmosphere in the room shift. It wasn't just admiration anymore. There was something else, tension, confusion, perhaps even fear. He could feel it crawling beneath the surface like a cold current. His eyes moved instinctively to the back of the hall where the man in the black suit still stood, motionless, almost too still. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't even blinking. And Sundar noticed something else. The man wasn't wearing a guest badge. His hands were crossed over his stomach, but the glint of a badge clipped to his belt peeked through his jacket. It wasn't a Tesla or Google credential. Lakshmi squeezed Sundar's hand gently. What's wrong, Kana? She whispered. Sundar shook his head softly, still watching the man. Nothing. Let's go sit down, he said, helping her toward the front row reserved for keynote speakers and board members. As he guided her to a seat, his assistant Jake appeared beside him, breathing slightly heavier than usual. Sundar, Jake said under his breath. That guy in the back. We just checked. He's not on the list. Security's talking to him now. Sundar turned toward Jake. Who is he? He showed a federal ID, but refused to identify his agency. Just said he needed to speak to you, alone. Sundar's eyebrows Furrowed. He glanced back again. The man was gone. It sent a chill down his spine. Meanwhile, the event resumed awkwardly. The host stammered through introductions, trying to re-establish the rhythm, but something had changed. Sundar's powerful speech had redirected the energy of the entire room. It was no longer just about tech and innovation. It was about humanity, respect, and the quiet power of those often ignored. But Sundar's mind was elsewhere. And so was his heart. Every now and then, he looked over at his mother, who sat quietly, sipping water, smiling at anyone who met her eyes. She didn't know what storm had begun to brew behind the scenes. She had no idea that Sundar's heartfelt gesture had made more than headlines. It had drawn attention, and not all of it was welcome. After the session ended, Sundar took Lakshmi backstage. Asterisk. Amma, do you want to rest? I've arranged a private room for you. You can freshen up. The Lakshmi smiled. I'm fine, Kana. But yes, maybe a little rest would be good. A staff member guided her gently toward the suite reserved for VIPs, while Sundar turned to Jake. Give me more information on that man, he said firmly. Jake nodded. Already working on it, but there's something else. Sundar waited. Reporter overheard part of the conversation outside. They're saying you were furious. Headlines are already calling it the moment that broke Silicon Valley Protocol. Sundar sighed. Let them talk. I don't regret it. Jake nodded again, then leaned closer. Double quotes also. The man left something behind. It was tucked under your mother's bench outside. He handed Sundar a small envelope. Sundar opened it slowly. Inside was a simple white card. No logo, no name. Just one sentence typed in clean black font. You're making enemies, mister. Pichai. Some of them don't. Like being embarrassed. Below that line was a second note handwritten in pen. Watch your back. And hers. Sundar's throat went dry. His fingers tightened around the card. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something more dangerous. Rage. He slipped the card into his inner jacket pocket and stood still for a long moment. It wasn't the first time he had been warned. The world of tech and power came with shadow-silent rivalries, corporate grudges, whispers of sabotage. But they had never involved his family before. And that crossed the line Sundar wasn't going to ignore. He called his head of security, Raj, and relayed everything. I want a full check of the venue, he said. Security on my mother. Discreet but constant. And background searches on every unregistered guest who came within 50 feet of her. Raj's tone sharpened. Yes, sir. Sundar hung up and stared out the tall glass window that overlooked the Tesla field, where prototype cars were displayed. People moved around, laughing, networking, posing for photos. But none of them knew what was coming. Sundar's phone buzzed. It was a message from Elon. Heard about your speech. Powerful. Meet me in green room B in 10, Sundar replied. On my way. As he walked toward the green room, he passed several executives who nodded at him with newfound respect. Some were genuine. Others were trying to align with the moment, clinging to relevance like moss to stone. He barely acknowledged them. When he entered the green room, Elon Musk was already seated, dressed casually in a black jacket, sipping something that looked like kombucha. He stood when he saw Sundar and reached out his hand. That was incredible, Elon said, shaking Sundar's hand firmly. Real. No filter. You broke the mold. Thanks, Sundar replied. But, Elon continued, lowering his voice. You also rattled a few cages. The Tesla board wasn't thrilled. Not with what you said, but with the timing. Sponsors are nervous. One threatened to pull funding. They say you turned the event into a social protest. Sundar crossed his arms. And what do you say? Elon leaned back and grinned. I say it needed to be said. They both laughed slightly, tension easing for a moment. Look, Elon said. Seriously, I've dealt with this kind of backlash. You're going to get hit from both sides. The people who want you to stay in your lane, and the ones who want to weaponize your words. But the only question that matters is this: do you believe in what you said? With everything, Sundar said, without hesitation. Then let's make sure your voice doesn't get buried. You're not just the CEO of Google. You're one of the few people who can shift global culture. Sundar nodded slowly, the weight of those words sinking in, but before he could speak again, Jake burst into the room, panting, double quotes, Sundar. Your mother's gone. The room fell silent. What? Sundar asked, stepping forward. The suite was empty. The staff said she asked for tea and never came back. No one's seen her in the last 20 minutes. Sundar's heart dropped. He turned sharply. Get security now. Check all exits. Cameras. Every hallway. Already doing it, Jake said. But there's something else. What? A witness says she got into a black car outside the side entrance. Sundar blinked. Was it a rideshare? No record. No number plate either. Cameras were offline. Ilan's eyes widened slightly. Someone planned this. Sundar didn't reply. He was already running. He burst out of the green room and down the hall, barking orders into his phone, his voice full of urgency and fire. Outside. Police sirens began to wail. Media scrambled to follow. The man in the black suit wasn't just a threat. He was a warning, and now Sundar's mother was gone. But whoever took her had made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because Sundar, Pichai was about to show them what happens when you touch the heart of a giant. Asterisk, the next 2 hours passed in a blur of flashing red lights, barking walkie-talkies, and the echo of footsteps racing across polished marble floors. Sundar stood in the center of the Tesla event compound, surrounded by a chaos he could barely hear. People were shouting, investigators were moving fast, and executives were gathering in hushed circles, trying to make sense of what had just unfolded. But Sundar was silent. His mind was a battlefield of memories and fears. Every time he blinked, he saw his mother's face, her soft smile, the gentle curve of her sari as she sat near the window drinking tea that morning. And now she was gone, vanished, from right under his nose. Not in a foreign country, not in a random alley, but inside one of the most secure, high-profile venues in Silicon Valley. This isn't random, he muttered to himself, pacing as the police ran background checks. Jake ran up with a clipboard and a pale expression. We've pulled all security footage from the last 30 minutes, but there's a blackout between 4:23 and 4:42. Cameras covering the eastern corridor and the executive parking lot just froze. They show nothing. Coincidence? Sundar asked. No chance. Jake replied. Just then, Raj, the head of Sundar's personal security, approached with a strange look on his face. He held something wrapped in a velvet cloth. We found this, he said, unwrapping it carefully. It was a gold chain. Simple, traditional, with a tiny ruby pendant at the center. Sundar's heart skipped a beat. That's Uma's, he said, immediately grabbing it with trembling fingers. She's worn this since I was a child. We found it near the private staff exit, Raj explained. No cameras there. And there's something else. He handed Sundar a sealed envelope. The outside read, for your eyes only, Mr. Pichai. Inside was another printed card. You've built empires on silence and systems. Let's see what you build without her. This time, the message was typed with cold precision. No handwritten note. No threats, just a statement. A calculated punch. To his soul, Sundar's hands tightened, his knuckles turning white. They want to destabilize me, he whispered. El had rejoined him by then, his expression grim. This isn't a ransom. This is a power play. Exactly, Sundar replied. This is someone sending a message. Someone with resources, someone who knows our weaknesses, our schedules, even our blind spots. Ilan nodded. Have you made any enemies lately? Sundar laughed bitterly. You mean other than half of Wall Street? Or the data privacy sharks? Or that time I refused to sell that defense AI package to the government? Ilan didn't smile. Then this could be geopolitical, or corporate, or worse, personal. The air around them grew heavier with each possibility. Sundar knew that the world he had entered, the upper echelons of power was a web of unseen threats. People smiled in public, but plotted in silence. The higher you rose, the fewer people wanted you to stay there, but now they hadn't come. After his business, they came after his mother, and that was unforgivable, meanwhile. Inside a dimly lit room across the city, Lakshmi slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she noticed was the silence. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was cold and still, like the air had been drained out of the walls. She was sitting on a cushioned chair, her sari slightly wrinkled, her handbag missing. Amma. A voice echoed softly, almost Mo. O-C-K-N-G-L-Y. She turned. A man stepped into the light. Tall, clean-shaven, expensive watch. A face she didn't recognize, but one that seemed too smooth to be trustworthy. I apologize for the discomfort, he said, placing a cup of tea on a tray beside her. We didn't mean to frighten you. In fact, you're not in danger. We just want to talk. Lakshmi stayed calm. Her eyes scanned the room. No windows, a single door. No visible locks, but no escape either. You took me from my son, she said quietly. Yes, the man replied. Because we needed to get your son's attention, and clearly we have it. What do you want? She asked. The man smiled. Not money. Not fame. We want him to think. We want him to hesitate. You see, MR Pichai is difficult. He doesn't bend. He doesn't play the games others in his position are supposed to play. Lakshmi stayed silent. And his influence? The man continued. It's becoming inconvenient. Especially after today's little speech. Human rights? Humility? Public accountability? The markets don't like soft-hearted billionaires. Lakshmi narrowed her eyes. So you punish him? By using me? Not punish, the man said, smoothly. Remind him that even the most powerful people have soft spots. And the world has claws. Asterisk. Lakshmi didn't flinch. Her silence was her strength. And the man didn't like that. He'll come for you, she said calmly. You know that, don't you? The man leaned forward slightly. We're counting on it. Back at the event compound, Sundar sat in a private suite surrounded by monitors. Raj and his team had set up a temporary command center. Every screen showed different feeds, traffic cams, license plate scans, airport gates, border control alerts. His phone vibrated nonstop calls from the press, from concerned executives, from family back home in India. Asterisk. He ignored all of them. Jake entered again, this time with a file. We might have something, he said. 23 minutes after your mother left the event, a black SUV was spotted by traffic cams exiting Highway 84. Inside was a woman matching her description. But get this, the vehicle is registered to a shell company based in Dubai. It's been used in 3 other surveillance cases connected to corporate espionage. Sundar stood up. Do we have a lead on where it went? The last signal was lost. In the warehouse district east of Palo Alto. Send me the coordinates, Sundar said. We're going there. Wait, what? Sundar, that's not protocol. You're a high-risk target. We should let law enforcement handle this. Sundar turned to Jake, his eyes sharper than ever. She's my mother, he said. I'm not waiting around for red tape. Elan stepped forward. I'll come with you. Sundar paused. This isn't your fight. She's your mother. You're my friend, Elan said simply. Besides, I know that part of the city better than anyone. Half of Tesla's early prototypes were tested out there. Raj stepped between them. If you're going, we're doing this right. Armored vehicle, full surveillance team, drone, coverage. I'll lead it myself. Sundar nodded. An hour later, 3 black SUVs rolled out of the compound, weaving through traffic with coordinated precision. Inside, Sundar sat quietly beside Raj, his mother's chain still in his hand. He stared at the ruby in the center, remembering when he gave it to her on his first paycheck. She wore it every day since. Even now, she had dropped it on purpose. A message, a trail. He knew his mother. She wasn't weak. She was the strongest woman he knew, and if she had left that chain behind, it meant she was still fighting, The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time they reached the warehouse district. Long shadows stretched across abandoned buildings. Graffiti stained the walls, and broken streetlights flickered like dying stars. Raj signaled his team. Drones launched into the sky. Cameras rolled. Then a radio crackled. We've got heat signatures. Building C. 3 floors. Top level. 4 bodies. Sundar's pulse quickened. He climbed out of the SUV. Ignoring warnings, he was done waiting. As they moved toward the building, something inside him changed. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a son, and he was ready to burn the world down to bring his mother back. Asterisk the heavy metal doors of warehouse. C stood like a silent gate to a world Sundar never imagined stepping into. Old rust clung to the hinges, and a faint chemical odor hung in the air, a mixture of gasoline, dust, and stale water. The building itself looked abandoned from the outside, with shattered glass panes and weeds crawling along the walls like vines reclaiming forgotten ground. But the heat signatures from the drones said otherwise. Raj crouched beside Sundar, hand on his earpiece, issuing soft commands to the tactical team surrounding the building. We've confirmed 4 bodies on thermal, 1 stationary, 3 moving. No signs of alarms, but we don't know what kind of tech they're using inside. Could be shielded. Could be a trap. Sundar adjusted the earpiece that had been clipped onto his collar. If my mother's inside, we go now. Raj studied him, then gave a single nod. Team 1, on me. Execute soft breach. No flash. No noise. As the squad fanned out around the structure, Sundar followed closely, heart pounding with a fury he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about pride anymore, or power or public image. This was about his mother, his anchor, his compass. The woman who never let go of his hand, even when the world turned against her. And now, someone had dared to use her as bait. Raj raised his hand. The side entrance clicked. The door eased open, with a metallic groan. Inside. Shadows stretched across. Long hallways lined with forgotten crates, old workbenches, and corroded tools. The only light came from the drone's infrared cameras, feeding live to Roger's handheld tablet. Left hallway clear. Team 2 moving upstairs, a voice whispered through the radio. Sundar followed Raj and 2 security agents deeper into the building. Each step echoed like thunder in his ears. They passed a stack of boxes with old computer parts, coils of wire, and what looked like deconstructed surveillance equipment. This wasn't random, Raj murmured. Someone's been using this place for a while. Then suddenly, contact, floor 3. The voice in Raj's earpiece shot through like electricity. Visual on hostage. Repeat, visual on hostage. Sundar's chest tightened. He broke into a run, ignoring Raj's protests. Up 2 flights of steel stairs. The building shook slightly with each hurried step. Sundar's breath was shallow now, his fists clenched. They burst onto the 3rd floor wide, hollow and dimly lit by a single lamp hanging from a rafter. And there she was. Lakshmi sat in the center of the room, her hands loosely tied in front. Of her sari wrinkled but intact. Her eyes met Sundar's, and for a split second, time stopped. Sundar shouted, his voice cracking. Lakshmi's eyes welled with tears. Kana? Before he could reach her, 2 men stepped from the shadows. Both wore black tactical gear, their faces partially obscured by masks. They didn't look surprised. In fact, they looked calm. Stop right there, one of them said. Raj and his team surged forward. Weapons drawn, creating a wall between Sundar and the masked men. Let her go, Raj ordered. We don't take orders from billionaires, the man replied coldly. Then he reached into his jacket slowly and held up a flash drive. This is what we wanted him to see, he said, tossing it onto the ground in front of Sundar. What is it? Sundar asked, his eyes locked on the man. Truth, the man replied. About your past, your company, your silence. Before Sundar could respond, the lights in the building flickered, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed them. Gunfire erupted. Screams. Glass shattering. Someone shouted, smoke. the room filled with thick, choking clouds. Drones buzzed above, but even their infrared feeds went static. Sundar dropped to the floor, crawling toward the direction of his mother's chair. He could barely see, barely breathe, but he refused to stop. Amma, hold on. Sundar. Her voice called out, weak but close. His fingers brushed against her arm. He pulled her close, using his body to shield her from the chaos. Raj's voice came through the radio, barely audible through the noise. Fall back, regroup outside, not without her. Sundar shouted. A hand reached through the fog. It was one of Raj's men, grabbing Sundar's shoulder. This way, sir. They moved fast, half carrying Lakshmi, dodging through smoke and confusion. Gunshots still rang out behind them, but they didn't stop until the cold night air hit their lungs. Outside, Raj was already directing teams into position. Drones were sweeping the building again, but by the time they got back in, by the time they cleared every floor, the masked men were gone. The flash drive was still there, intact. Sundar sat beside his mother on the ground, holding her hand tightly as paramedics checked her vitals. You're safe now? He whispered, brushing dust from her hair. Lakshmi looked up at him with tired eyes. They didn't hurt me, Kana. Not physically. But they wanted you to see that message. Sundar turned to Raj. Give me a laptop now. Within minutes, he sat inside the SUV with Jake and Raj. The flash drive connected to a secure device. The screen lit up. A folder appeared. Project. Scepter. Inside were dozens of files. Emails, videos, recorded board meetings. Government contracts. Sundar opened one. A video played blurry footage of a private meeting at an offshore resort. Faces he recognized, CEOs, senators, military officials. They were talking about surveillance systems, secret ones, built on data collected through apps, devices, home assistants, and the name Google came up more than once. This, Jake muttered, this can't be real. It is, Sundar said, jaw tight. It's everything we feared and more. He clicked on another file. It was labeled BlackBerry Protocol, usage in oppressive regimes. And there, in black and white, were details about how certain technologies originally developed for consumer convenience were used to silence protests in multiple countries. Not officially, not with company permission, but through partnerships, through silence. And Sundar knew one thing instantly. This wasn't just an attack on his family. This was a test. Someone wanted to see what he would do with this knowledge. And the question was, would he protect the legacy he'd built or destroy it to tell the truth? He sat back, staring at the screen. His mother reached over and placed her hand on his arm. Your decision will define you, she said softly. Not your title, not your company, not your money, but what you choose to do when you know what is right. Sundar looked at her. Then he looked at the screen again. And made his choice. Asterisk. The wind howled outside the SUV as Sundar sat in silence. The soft glow of the laptop screen reflecting in his eyes. The chaos of the warehouse rescue was over, but in its place had risen something deeper, quieter, more dangerous. The weight of what he had just seen didn't scream, it whispered. And in that whisper was the roar of millions of unheard voices. People affected, lives manipulated, freedoms erased in silence. The flash drive sat on the seat beside him like a ticking bomb. It wasn't just a collection of files. It was truth, unfiltered, raw, and damning. And in the wrong hands, or even the right ones at the wrong time, it could dismantle corporations, ruin governments, and shatter the illusion of control that tech giants had spent decades constructing. Asterisk. Raj, seated across from him, looked grave. Jake had stopped pacing and was staring at the ground, his voice a hoarse whisper. If we go public with this, it could destroy everything. Stocks will crash. Allies will turn on us. You might be held responsible even if you didn't know. I know, Sundar said quietly, eyes never leaving the screen. But if we bury this, then we become part of it. His mother, seated beside him now, gently reached for his hand. Her touch was soft, grounding. The truth is heavy, Kenna, she said, but carrying a lie is even heavier. Sundar nodded. The voices around him, all the board meetings, the press conferences, the carefully worded statements, none of them had prepared him for this moment. The clean air of Silicon Valley felt dirty now. All the awards and accolades on his office wall seemed meaningless. His success had been real, but now he had to ask himself at what cost. We need a plan, Jake said, breaking the silence. We don't leak this, Sundar said, looking up. We don't dump it on a blog or give it to some journalist to dissect. This isn't about creating chaos. It's about creating clarity. He turned to Raj. Secure a private line. Full encryption. I want to talk to the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee. And then I want a live broadcast. What kind of broadcast? Jake asked. A press address. Global. Streamed through every Google platform. And then syndicated everywhere we can get it. You're going to stand up there and tell the world you've been sitting on secrets? Raj asked, not in defiance, but in disbelief. No, Sundar said. I'm going to tell the world that the age of secrets is over. The next 48 hours were the most turbulent in Sundar's life. He didn't sleep. He barely ate. His team operated like a shadow government meeting in underground bunkers, scrubbing files, verifying every shred of data on the drive to ensure its authenticity. Legal advisors came in hushed, anxious waves. Some begged him to reconsider. Others threatened to resign. One high-ranking executive slammed a folder on the table and shouted, "You'll kill this company." Sundar didn't flinch. "Then let it die," he said calmly. "Because if this is what we've built, maybe. It deserves to." His mother remained close throughout it all. She didn't interfere. She didn't advise. She simply sat by the window, folding his shawl when he forgot it, bringing him tea without asking, and humming the same old lullaby she used to sing when he was small. Her presence was his compass. Her quiet dignity, her strength, those were the things that gave him the courage to face the storm. Meanwhile, outside the walls of their private headquarters, rumors had already begun to swirl. Leaked images from the warehouse, whispers of an internal coup, hashtags like hashtag where Sundar and hashtag tech truths were trending. Reporters camped outside corporate offices, buzzing with questions no one could answer. And then Sundar went live. The broadcast began with a simple black screen. No music, no fancy graphics. Then the image of Sundar Pichai appeared. He wore a plain gray shirt, no tie, no blazer. Just honesty. His face was tired. Not weak, but weary. The kind of tired that only comes from staring into the darkest parts of a bright empire. He looked directly into the camera. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady. "My name is Sundar Pichai. And today, I'm not speaking to you as the CEO of Google. I am speaking to you as a son, a citizen, and a man who has seen too much to remain silent." He paused. 2 days ago, my mother was taken from a public event, not for ransom, not for harm, but as a warning. Because someone knew that if she was touched, I would listen. He held up the flash drive. This contains proof of systems created or enabled by tech companies, including mine, that have been used in ways we never publicly admitted, to monitor, to manipulate, and in some cases, to oppress. He continued, his voice growing stronger. "For years we believed that data was the new oil. That convenience was more important than conscience. We allowed ourselves to build tools without fully understanding how those tools could be twisted. And even when we did understand, we stayed silent, out of fear, out of profit, out of pride." He leaned forward. "That ends now. Across the world, screens lit up phones, televisions, tablets. People gathered in living rooms, cafes, airports. Some gasped. Others wept. Many just listened, hearts pounding. Double quotes today. We are launching an independent, international inquiry-led, not by us, but by human rights organizations and technology ethicists. We are releasing this data to them in full. We are creating a permanent public record, and we are inviting every major tech company to join us. To step forward, not with excuses, but with truth. He paused again. This will cost us. Money, status, maybe even the company itself. But the truth is worth more than all of it. He looked down for a moment, then back at the camera. I was raised by a woman who taught me that character is what you do when no one is watching. But today, all of you are watching. And I want my children and yours to live in a world where power doesn't hide behind silence. He ended the broadcast with a simple sentence. Let this be the beginning of something better. The screen went black, and the world held its breath. For the next few hours, there was silence. No immediate backlash. No official response. It was the calm before a tidal wave. Governments called emergency meetings. Competitors froze there. Operations. Boardrooms filled with stunned executives trying to strategize their next move. But the streets, those told a different story. People gathered with candles outside Google offices across the world. Not in protest, in solidarity. Activists who had long shouted into voids were now being heard. Whistleblowers stepped forward, emboldened by Sundar's courage. And within 24 hours, other CEOs, Tim Cook, Satya Nadella, even old rivals released statements of support. But not everyone was pleased. At 3:13 a.m. Raj burst into Sundar's suite. We have a problem. Sundar looked up, exhausted but alert. Raj threw down a tablet. On it was a video. Grainy. Night vision. The same masked man from the warehouse. He stood in front of a camera. Voice modulated. You think this is over, Mr. Pichai? You've opened the gates. But not all the monsters are outside. Some still live inside the palace. The screen flickered. Next. We show the world what they did to your father. Sundar stared at the screen, the color draining from his face. Appa? He whispered. His father had passed away nearly 6 years ago. The world had known it was due to natural causes. Old age. Heart complications. But now this man was suggesting something else. His mother, who had entered the room moments earlier, gasped and held the back of the chair to steady herself. What do they mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sundar didn't answer. He was already picking up the phone, because whatever storm he had just unleashed. Was only the beginning. Asterisk, the room had never felt colder. Sundar stood frozen, his eyes locked on the flickering image of the masked man who had just reopened a wound he thought had healed. Outside, the night pressed against the glass windows, the moon casting long shadows across the floor, as if the darkness itself had come to listen. The words echoed again in his mind. Next. We show the world what they did to your father. Behind him, Lakshmi lowered herself slowly into a chair, her face pale, her hands trembling. She looked like she had just heard a ghost call out from the grave. Kanna, she said softly. Your Appa. He died of heart failure. We knew this. But Sundar didn't respond. He remembered the day vividly. He had just left a high-stakes product launch in London when the call came. He remembered his knees buckling. He remembered flying back to India, walking through crowds of mourners and holding his mother through the silence of grief. They had buried Appa with honor, with dignity. But now, was it all a lie? Raj, Sundar said slowly, his voice a whisper laced with steel. Dig into everything from that year. Medical records, hospital logs, travel data, everything. And get in touch with Dr. Iyer and Chennai, the one who treated my father. On it, Raj said, already dialing. Lakshmi clutched her son's hand. Why would anyone say something like this now? What do they want? Sundar looked down at her, the pain in his chest heavier than anything he had carried these past few days. They want me to stop, he said. They want me to back away from the truth. A beat of silence passed. But now, Amma, now I need to know the whole truth. For him, for you, for everything. Within 6 hours, a flood of information came in. The first revelation was simple and horrifying. Dr. Ayer had retired 5 years ago. But he still kept private notes. In a shaky voice over a secured call. He confessed to Raj that 2 days before Sundar's father passed away, an unmarked black car had parked outside the clinic. A man in a dark suit approached him, asking questions about Sundar's career trajectory, his proximity to foreign policy, and whether the doctor had been instructed to keep the heart medication dosage consistent. Dr. Iyer had thought it was just a random intelligence audit. He had no proof the man was government or corporate or anything at all. But the next day, Dr. Iyer's assistant had been fired suddenly, and the hospital had issued a warning for him to stop asking questions. And then Sundar's father had died in his sleep. Quietly, unexpectedly, and much earlier than expected. Now, years later, everything looked different. There was no autopsy, no toxicology report, no further questions. Just silence. Sundar sat in his office, staring at the photograph of his father he kept on his desk.